I'm Fatheree.
This is Dave.
And this is Tex-Trek. Yet another round of Discovery news, this time on Tex-Trek. Last time we were talking about the big Comic-Con reveals that we got a few weeks ago. And now we have another big helping of Star Trek Discovery news.
They're just cranking it out.
Yeah, and
they can't stop talking about themselves.
I think it's probably going to slow down a little bit. We'll still get like a couple of big things.
Right? They're like, we can't actually show you the episode before the episode. Sorry.
But yeah, I mean, we're getting close. We're in the final few weeks before we're almost down to I guess a month and a half.
We're in the stage where you start coming up with crazy theories.
And we'll get into the crazy theories in a little bit. Picking up where we left off last time, after the Comic-Con panels that took place in San Diego, there were some interviews with the cast members that different media entities were performing, and we pieced together some new stuff.
They're all doing like their press junkets and stuff now.
Yeah, and I think one of the cool reveals that we got is a character that we haven't had much previous info on. Shazad Latif's character, Ash Tyler, who I believe is going to be a Starfleet security officer. We learned that he's going to be a POW at the beginning of the show, so I think it'll be a guy who is maybe rescued or is just recently rescued or liberated from the Klingons.
Right, not a guy who is a former POW who's been living with it for years and maybe has like PTSD, but a guy who was literally like maybe liberated during the course of the episode or right prior or something.
Yeah, and I think that'll be interesting to have a character like that. I think they might be going the type of approach that original series stuff did a little bit, where you'd have guys who were really pissed off at aliens. Either they had an ancestor who died in the Romulan War, or they didn't trust Klingons. So I wonder if he'll have that kind of vendetta out to get the Klingons back for what they did to them.
Right, that'd be interesting.
We also learned some things about Lieutenant Stamets that I have an interesting theory on. Now that we know that the character Cadet Tilly will be working in engineering with Lieutenant Stamets, an odd place for a astromycologist specializing in space fungus. We know that he is involved in a science project that's strongly tied to the USS Discovery's mission.
I don't know if there's ever been a Star Trek show where any science project has ever been tied to a mission beyond like the scope of a single episode where something Wesley's doing fits in with what they, how they're going to get saved.
Yeah, and I think this is meaning that this is just going to be an experimental ship. We do know in the Comic-Con trailer that the Discovery is creating a new way to fly, as Captain Lorca put it. So, as weird as this sounds, I think
maybe it just means he's going to try spinning. That's a good trick.
No, this isn't Star Wars.
Right.
But as weird as it sounds, I think we're going to have some type of mushroom-powered computer or a warp engine that's based on fungus or something like that.
I don't think it's the craziest notion, but what I'm trying to figure out, I'm trying to wrap my head around the notion of, we talked about this off camera a little bit. There was, way back in the Voyager day, they had the, binaural circuitry?
Binaural circuitry.
Right. And what are they going to do to differentiate this if that's the case? Is it going to be, was it the Quadrotriticale on the old Tribbles episode that actually had like a fourth dimensional aspect to it or something like that?
I thought it was just like good grain.
Now, there was something, and I'm going to have to look this up. This is awkward.
Maybe it was something from like a book or something. I don't think that was in the episode.
No, like I felt like there was, maybe it is. Anyway, if it is something like that, yes, it turns out that this, you can breed this fungus and put it in these conditions, and, you can, in that case, it actually extends into, warp space and allows us to, it will literally have some kind of pseudoscience mumbo jumbo technobabble reason why it helps them do that. But what are they going to be doing? How will that be different in storytelling wise than bioneural circuitry?
The bioneural circuitry didn't really come up that much, which I'm okay with. I never really thought that was that cool. I thought that was a little weird to have in Trek. I don't know if this is something where like they have like fungus that can open like a subspace corridor and they travel quickly with the ship. We do know that Starfleet was trying to develop transwarp technology, like in the Search for Spock, and they were experimenting with different propulsion around this time period.
According to, just because it would be developed within 20 years or whatever for purposes of Search for Spock.
Yeah, or you maybe like for the last few decades they were experimenting.
Like I meant like, oh yes, there was an episode of Enterprise where they mention it or something. There's not.
No,
we're just saying that it would logically. You're just saying it would logically fall somewhere in there.
Yeah, like
somebody's got to be looking at it.
They experiment with engines sometimes.
Yep.
In the 23rd century.
So maybe they have like some proto transwarp drive that runs off of fungus. It sounds weird as hell to say that.
But we do know they have that
they're going to have some good techno-babble to cover to explain that one to me if that's the case.
Funny you mention that, because one of the things that a lot of people have given Anthony Rapp, playing Lieutenant Paul Stamets, a lot of credit for is that he is a master of the techno-babble. And he'll probably grow to hate this, because the same thing happened with LeVar Burton on The Next Generation. When the writers figure out you can deliver
that line without stumbling and stuff,
then you get all of those lines forever until the end of the show.
Yeah. that's pretty funny, actually.
Same thing with happened to Gata on Battlestar Galactica. But one last thing about Paul Stamets, he's based on a real-life mycologist named Paul Stamets.
His name alone, or something about his personality and demeanor?
I don't know as far as personality goes, but yeah, the name and the the field of science.
Did you say this was a Bryan Fuller thing? Like he had a fascination with the guy or something?
That's where I'm thinking it came from. There is
like this guy could be like the rock star of
the fungus science world. Yeah, like,
right.
There's a TED talk he did that I'll post a link to that in the description, so you can check that out. But yeah, this is probably the weirdest thing about the show, and it's so surreal that we're having this conversation.
Yes, it is.
How does fungus fit into the new Star Trek show?
I will say this, we feel like we've been able to piece together kind of big chunks of the show, guess at some of the twists and turns of the first episode. I know there's going to be some that we didn't, but we've got some bits and pieces. I don't think we got anything on this fungus yet.
Yeah.
Other than your crazy theory that it's basically like a moonshine-powered ship.
I think the Discovery, and it's going to have some weird experimental purpose with the fungus.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it has to do with either propulsion. How do you say it?
Propulsion?
Yeah, or thank you.
Yeah.
Or
it's gonna have just like a giant Super Mario mushroom on each of the nacelles.
Maybe, yeah. Maybe it has like the Mario like power up little tune that it plays in the game when they power up the engines.
Seems as likely as anything else we're discussing.
Or it could be like a power source or a computer or some type of organic computer. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it's definitely weird. So moving on to less weird things. We also had a new issue of Entertainment Weekly where we had a picture of the transporter room. And it looks way better than that weird Shenzhou transporter room we saw previously.
Yeah, by contrast, the Shenzhou one looks like some kind of artsy transporter room. It's unusual. This one that we're looking at, which I assume our video people will be able to see, has the traditional sort of somewhat circular transporter pad with like a half dozen or so circular transporter stands above and below. There is set against the background is a sort of vivid blue swath with I can't quite tell, some sort of some sort of dark black grill over it, almost. You can still see a fair amount of blue, so it brings some color to it.
Yeah, that cool blue that they're using on like every set on the Federation ships. It looks like, which I guess is just the in color now. Whenever you want something to look futuristic, you use a
Thanks,
cool
Blade
blue
Runner
color.
Yeah, well, you know, we'll see how they use it. I mean, you know, the, what do you call it? The Abrams kind of, you know, took it to have that Apple Store pristine white in some ways.
Yeah, no, I think
they used a few different color palettes, but yeah. There is something kind of futury about those kind of cool blues. It looks spacey.
These sets look great. They look like you can tell that they're pouring a lot of money into the production design. I love the self lighting that you know things will. I guess that's the thing that they do a lot in TV now, is that like the sets like light themselves. So you don't have like the
stage lighting and stuff like that. Yeah, like literally there's just.
Well, you get so much light from the set that you're building that when you're photographing the actors on the set, you don't have to use as much additional lighting.
That's cool, and I bet the actors like it too.
Yeah, because it's not 1,000 degrees with all those lights on.
Right.
Kind of like how we are when we shoot this in front of my green screen. Entertainment Weekly also touched on some things that we've been speculating on for the better part of a year now, and that is Bryan Fuller's departure from Discovery. Entertainment Weekly talked to Fuller, and we got the full details on what happened there. We also learned more about...
The truth is, he wanted to make it too good, and the studio said, no, we want some crap in it.
Well, if you ask some people, that's how they've been interpreting the thing.
I was just doing a quick summary of that version.
Yeah, there was a little bit of conflicting ideas. Initially, Bryan Fuller wanted the show to be an anthology. Like, he compared it to American Horror Story, where every season would be a different story. And that was the initial rumor early on. He was actually the one who debunked that rumor, like a year ago. But CBS wanted to make it one ongoing show. Kind of makes sense when you have a new concept and you're spending a lot of money to build all these sets and stuff. You'd want it to be something that you can, branch off of and keep using the things you're building, the actors you're casting.
Without having seen Discovery and having anything to compare it with, I like the idea of the anthology better than Discovery.
I think it would make a good spin-off. If Discovery is successful, then they can do an anthology show at the same time they have Discovery on.
Yeah.
Like
I would love it if we were so decadent and successful with Trek as to have two Trek shows running at the same time. They never had three at the same time, did they?
No, but like a 7-year chunk of my childhood, there were two Trek shows on at the same time.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And I just thought that was normal, and life would always be like that.
Yeah.
I was wrong. What I've speculated all along was that Fuller was too busy working with American Gods, and that definitely seems to be the case. The show was getting delayed because he was taking too long to make choices. As someone pointed out in the Entertainment Weekly article, this isn't a cop show where you just go and get some cop uniforms and some cop cars. You have to actually choose designs and build everything. Mm-hmm. He was spending as much time on American Gods, which was having some trouble while it was shooting, that CBS finally asked him to leave. So that is unfortunate. He did mention, though, that he would be open to returning to Discovery, contributing in a second season. I don't know if he still feels that way, but...
That sounds like a soft breakup, but you don't necessarily mean it. It could be it's not you, it's me kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I like the idea. I hope it'd be cool if he was able to come back to the show.
But I'm also, if the show was getting delayed and pushed back, and if he did have too much on his plate, and he was unable to get the show developed, he probably did need to leave.
Yeah.
I'm
you don't want someone half-assing this big shot that Star Trek's got.
Yeah, and I mean, nothing against him. I know that he wanted to work on Star Trek all his life, he said, and he
apparently not that hard.
Well, he already had something else going with American Gods, and he couldn't back out of that. So I don't really blame him, but it sounds like they're still going with a lot of his ideas and his initial story, and apparently the bald Klingons he wanted we'll get into more of that.
Yeah, that's why he had to flee, because the torches and pitchforks were coming. He knew it.
But one of the good things that came out of the delays, and one of the reasons why there was an additional delay, was because they were spending a lot of time finding the actor to play the lead, eventually discovering Sonequa Martin Green, and AMC wouldn't release her until the episode of, spoiler alert for The Walking Dead, which is already a rotten show, so I'm not sure how you could spoil it. I don't like anything but Star Trek. Before her character...
Yeah, go and alienate our audience. Do it. Just go ahead.
I don't know. The Walking Dead sucks.
That's I enjoyed that show, and I watched it for like 3 seasons or so.
Yeah, I couldn't get past the second season, but...
Go ahead.
The AMC people wouldn't release Sonequa Martin Green until the episode of her character's death aired. Mm-hmm. So they couldn't really do much with Discovery until that episode dropped.
I get that. The instant that happens, or that they're talking about her going to some other show, people are like, "Oh, guess she's dead."
Yeah,
on a show like that.
It did leak that we all knew that she was going to be on Discovery playing the lead, and I guess people who care about that show predicted that her character would die. Maybe the show will die soon, and its slot can be replaced with something that doesn't suck.
For those of you who are penning your angry emails to Fatheree right now, go ahead and do that. But just know, I kind of like Walking Dead. I enjoyed it for a little while.
But Dave thinks Game of Thrones is pulp trash.
It is pulp trash, but I'm watching season 5 and enjoying it right now and catching up, even though it's pulp trash.
Season 5.
Yep. It's big stuff, people.
We also got some more info from the showrunners on the Klingons in the show and exactly how they'll be used. Star Trek has a long-standing history of allegory, and the Klingons were initially a stand-in for the Soviet Russians during the Cold War. That's not going to be the case with Star Trek Discovery. To quote showrunner Aaron Harberts, we are also talking about not only war, but something that is really bubbling up in the United States right now. Isolationism. Our country has so many different philosophies. Do we extend a hand? Do we shut it down? And that is also 2 viewpoints that are being expressed. The Klingons are not necessarily the Russians anymore. The Klingons, I think we will see far more in, frankly, people in the United States and different factions in the United States.
It's interesting. So maybe Klingons as sort of hawkish isolationists.
I think people who are feeling attacked, they're feeling like the Federation is putting Klingon kind at a disadvantage. I think they're going to be a stand-in for Trump's America, honestly, but.
You always hope that they do it artfully. That you don't want it to be so obviously one-to-one that you don't take them seriously as anything more than a symbol. And since they've talked about going so much into Klingon culture, I have a feeling that'll be the case. They're going to try and make them distinct and an alien race and delve more into the culture. But yeah, that sounds Klingons as United States. That feels alright to me.
And we also learned there's going to be different factions and different viewpoints among the Klingons. We've heard some other stuff about there being 24 different Klingon houses that are all going to be a little different.
I think we talked about maybe in our Voyager premiere episode discussion that there a lot of times shows like Star Trek uses shorthand the idea that an alien race is kind of one homogenous thing.
Yeah,
they're all
monocultural.
Right, they're all religious or they're all honorable or whatever.
They're saying
it sounds like the Klingons have. I mean, honestly, they did already do a lot of work with this in TNG and other stuff, but they will be. It sounds like further developing the notion that they are more than one thing.
yeah, they're going to be delved into more, which I would think the Klingons have probably been explored more than any other race. But
yeah, if you're like bring on the Tholians, and I'd do down for that, but They are also, if you're trying to sell a new Star Trek, especially after Abrams' disappointing use of them in Star Trek Into Darkness, you want to do cool stuff with the most iconic bad guys of Trek. I get it. For
sure. And we also know that the show is going to be told a lot from the Klingon perspective, and
that's interesting.
So they're not going to be just two-dimensional bad guys either. And the way I interpret it, you might not sympathize with them, but you will at least be able to empathize with them,
right?
And understand where they're coming from, even if you disagree with it, which is probably a good lesson. This is going to piss some people off. That's probably a good lesson for a lot of the
leftists.
A lot of the liberal Americans who are in resistance to Trump's America.
Sure. I super lefty guy, and a lot of my friends and I are all feeling very uncharitable would be the nice way to put it towards the opposition right now. There is, and I know the feeling is also on the other side. There's a sense that the divide is too great to bridge, and why would you want to? You see your friends being hurt by these policies and everything. So yes, if they can tell a story about those kind of themes, something that has some real meaning to it, that will be Star Trek doing what it does best.
Yeah, and what it should be doing. That is what it should do in 2017.
Yeah.
So fingers crossed they pull it off. They're talking a good game, and I wish them all the luck. I'm cheering for this show. It definitely sounds like it's on an approach I can get behind, even if I think the Klingons look weird.
Are we gonna talk about that?
It's
just that it's looking more and more like that's just how Klingons look now.
Yeah, well, we're about to get that. We're gonna shift gears now and go to Star Trek Las Vegas, the huge Star Trek convention that happens every year. Took place last week. I've never gone. I wanted to go this year and didn't because I'm going on the Star Trek cruise in January.
You done the cruise before?
No.
You done any cruise before?
No, I've never been at sea before. So
this is gonna be exciting.
It will be, and I'll be glad in January that I didn't go to Vegas. But
they're gonna say engage when they launch, right?
You would think so. And I'll be sure to update what's going on the Star Trek cruise when January comes. But as far as Vegas goes, Discovery had a big presence there, which kind of surprised me in a good way. I didn't know if CBS would really market the show to the fan base. I knew they were going to do something at Comic-Con. JJ would always do stuff at Comic-Con, but the JJ movies never really pushed things at the official Star Trek cons. They would have a little bit of presence there, but they weren't having panels with the writers revealing new details and stuff like that. So
with his approach, it makes sense on two levels. It makes sense on the level of he was shooting for a more emotional kind of Star Trek that I think it was closer to Star Wars in a lot of ways. At least they borrowed a lot of that kind of energy and everything. And B, the people who didn't like it, which I've at times been sort of one of, really don't like it, and I don't think you want to be in the room with them. I don't think you'd want to be trying to sell Star Trek 2009 to people, or Star Trek Into Darkness to the people who hated Star Trek 2009.
Yeah, that's probably true, but I'm glad that CBS was showing up and.
We want to see Trek not just you don't want it to be a redheaded stepchild. You want them to invest in it, and it sounds like they are.
So one of the panels at Star Trek Las Vegas, geared for Discovery, talked about the tie-in material. We had some creators present. David Mack was there, the author who's written several Star Trek novels and is writing Star Trek Discovery Desperate Hours, the tie-in novel coming out on Dave's birthday, September 26th.
Yep. We're talking about doing a reading and reporting in on that one as we go.
Yeah, so if anyone wants to hear our thoughts on it, we'll probably do probably do a spoiler-free review and then do a spoilery discussion, so it'll appeal to people who both have read the book and the people who haven't read it but might be curious. So we'll get to that after the book comes out. But we finally learned some story details. It sounds like this book will be a prequel to Discovery, and we'll focus on Michael Burnham when she became first officer of the Shenzhou. Set a year before the
events of the show.
The events of the first episode.
As an aside, the cover image, which I think is just a photo cover, she's standing there looking all badass with her phaser. She's like, get some.
The official synopsis: aboard the starship Shenzhou, Lieutenant Michael Burnham, a human woman raised and educated among Vulcans, is promoted to acting first officer. But if she wants to keep the job, she must prove to Captain Philippa Georgiou that she deserves to have it. She gets her chance when the Shenzhou must protect a Federation colony that is under attack by an ancient alien vessel that has surfaced from the deepest fathoms of the planet's dark, uncharted sea. As the menace from the mysterious vessel grows stronger, Starfleet declares the colony expendable in the name of halting the threat. To save thousands of innocent lives, Burnham must infiltrate the alien ship, but to do so, she needs to face the truth of her troubled past and seek the aid of a man she has tried to avoid her entire life, Sarek, until now.
I thought you were actually coughing.
No, so yeah, I think this makes it sound like she has some type of bad blood with. I can assume this must be Sarek, who we know raised her on Vulcan.
Right, they became estranged at some point, and now she's like...
As he does with the children that he raises, apparently.
Awkward guy.
That's his M.O.
Awkward guy.
He's kind of an asshole dad.
I know, but I love Sarek.
Yeah. But his kids don't love him.
Yeah, it's true. That's alright, I'm not his kids.
But no, yeah, the book sounds interesting. I think Mac has done a lot of good stuff before. I'm sure this will actually have some Easter eggs that tie into previously established things and help Discovery feel like more of the established universe.
I like infiltrating alien ships. That shit's cool. I'm gonna do it.
Yeah, and I wonder if that'll be like a Xindi aquatic or something that's been established before.
That'd be cool.
Because Mac loves to pull those little things from
the continuity.
Past episodes and use them in his books. We also had some new information on the second Discovery novel. I believe it was actually announced at this panel. And Dayton Ward, who has written some Trek stuff before, will be writing it. It will be another prequel set 10 years before the events of the show.
Huh. You think that might have more to do with Captain Georgiou?
I think it's either Georgiou, Kid Burnham, or something with the Klingons.
Kid Burnham.
Yeah. Oh, she's a character in the trailer. You know, Kid Burnham.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I was just imagining her Kid Rock trailer trash incarnation, I guess.
Or Kid Flash.
Yeah.
What's really exciting to me is the Star Trek Discovery comics that we learned about. It sounds like they're going to be doing small little mini-series of like 4 issues at a time. The first one will be a Klingon mini-series, the first issue coming out in October. And it has Takuvma on the cover, and it will be telling things from the Klingon perspective, delving into the Klingon world of Star Trek Discovery.
And these are all, I don't know if this is in our coming talking points, they've said that this is all sort of integrated canonical stuff, basically, right?
They didn't say it was canon, but someone at the panel, I believe, actually asked them if it was canon, and they kind of did the thing where they said no, but shook their heads yes.
Yeah. Right, like maybe officially, like, you know, they're like, for CBS and everything, they can't say it, but they're working as if it is.
And the reason for that is because Kristen Beyer, who has written 11 Star Trek Voyager novels and is a staff writer on the show, is also, I forgot the job title, but she's like creative officer something, where she's in charge of the tie-in material like this. So they actually have a staff writer involved with the books and with the comic, who I forgot to mention this. It's written by Mike Johnson, who currently writes the Star Trek Kelvin timeline comics they've been doing for the last few years.
I peer around on those every once in a while.
They're hit and miss.
They seem solid to me.
They've gotten better. Early on, I think he was very limited with what he could do, and he was just retelling a lot of TOS stories.
Right.
In the Kelvin aesthetics.
Right.
And I was just like, why am I reading this?
And sometimes they changed him up quite a bit.
Yeah, but sometimes they...
There was a few differences, yeah.
Yeah, like, it was almost...
It was just like, what if slightly snarkier Kirk was in the same place at the same time?
But, yeah, I'm definitely interested to see how Mike Johnson approaches the Discovery additions to the Star Trek universe. Because he is a fan, and he's another guy who kind of likes to reference things from the shows and kind of connect the dots with previously established bits of lore here and there.
Your writer's going to want to lean on that to help Fatheree get through his Klingon problems.
Yeah, and we'll get to that. But yeah, I'm excited about the tie-in material because, like you mentioned, they are doing this creative, what's the word? Synchronicity.
Yeah,
I guess where everything, the comics, the novels, the show, it's all coming out at the same time, and everything's being written aware of everything else. Even if the comics and novels aren't official canon, they're probably going to be using the same type of backstories and stuff that the show writers are using.
Right.
It's a cool way to really push the show.
Right. It's going to feel that things are a lot more integrated than they usually are. Where you might have at times over there, like, there would be a TNG. I remember when DC had the license, and there was like a TNG comic and a Star Trek, Kirk, original series comic, but based in the movie continuity, and maybe they would occasionally do like some one-off project of something else, but they weren't all kind of telling the same story. And since we know it fits the sort of the ethos of the show, which is sort of each season one big story, and then sort of this is like a meta version of that where book, comic, and show will all align pretty strongly.
Yeah, and they're definitely going to spread awareness of the show. Get people who are into the comics and Trek books more invested in the show, and also start making money off of merchandise.
Right.
That will if anything, keep the show on the air longer. Star Trek Las Vegas also had a Star Trek Discovery writers panel that was attended by some of the writer-producers on the show, including Ted Sullivan. He has a huge Twitter presence. He's responsible for the social media icon Jason Gorn. He's been a big, great ambassador for Discovery, interacting with people on Twitter, answering fan questions, posting funny pictures of him and his little Gorn action figure out on the Discovery sets. Kristen Beyer, who I mentioned earlier, the Star Trek novelist turned Discovery staff writer, and executive producer Akiva Goldsman, who is a huge name in Hollywood. He's like either a writer or a producer on every movie and every TV show ever for like the last 20 years.
Yep.
Sometimes really good stuff. Sometimes he wrote Batman and Robin.
Right. But didn't he have like a hand in like the Nolan movies too, or something?
Yeah, and I mean he's I think he's won Oscars for some screenplays. Like he's done like really good.
Yeah, did he like write A Beautiful Mind or something?
Yeah,
like
he
that?
wrote A Beautiful Mind. He wrote Cinderella Man.
Right. So, but yes, sort of a little kind of hit and miss, but omnipresent in like genre stuff.
But I'll tell you this right now, though. This panel got me super hyped for Discovery because these writers either are the perfect people to be working on Star Trek, or they are con artists that know exactly what to say to make it sound like they are. Because everything they said was what I wanted to hear. And one really cool thing they brought up was Ted Sullivan used this example of how they're writing the show, how they're approaching the canon, the continuity. He mentioned Bruce Timm and the Justice League cartoon from a decade ago that was on Cartoon Network, which I'm a huge fan of. If you like the DC universe, you definitely need to check out Bruce Timm's Justice League. It's the same guy behind the Batman animated series from the 90s, and this is, I guess, a sequel to that. But anytime you're referencing Bruce Timm, you're on the same page as me.
I feel like the Batman animated series followed by Superman, and then Justice League, and then Justice League Unlimited, generally considered among fandom some of the very best DC stories ever, up there with the best comic stuff.
Yeah.
Sometimes better than the comic stuff because they kind of did this great hindsight 2020 where they picked all the best parts. Bruce Timm is like, he was one of those guys you're like, oh, he got it. He gets DC.
And what Ted Sullivan said, he's talking about an episode of Justice League where the Green Lantern ring was broken.
Right, something breaks it.
Yeah, when he's fighting the Thanagarians invading Earth. The quote from Ted Sullivan, I think sometimes he's talking about canon. I think sometimes it gets in the way. I think of what Bruce Timm said once about making the Justice League cartoon. He came up with a pitch where they break the Green Lantern ring. Everyone said, you can't do that. It is indestructible. He said, I think we can. It will be good for the story. Sometimes you need to know when to break the ring, and sometimes you need to know when you don't. Luckily, we have a lot of people in the room who will tell you when to break the ring and when not to.
I like it.
Yeah, so... And I actually remember Bruce Timm talking about this on the DVD commentary on Justice League. But
I will let a lot of stuff slide if a good story comes out of it.
Quality wins.
Yeah.
And
so these Klingons, I'm just saying, they better be some quality fucking Klingons.
Yeah. And I'm a stickler for canon, but there are some flexibilities in there, and yeah, I don't mind the occasional continuity gymnastic, no prize. I've been doing that all my life. I'm pretty good at it. So yeah, if you're telling a good enough story, we'll find ways to make it work. But they do mention several times that they are concerned about canon, they are concerned about continuity, and they want to make sure that it does fit. But yeah, if they have a ring that needs to be broke, they're going to break it. And if that's the approach I think should be taken.
I would like a little boldness over sort of storytelling conservatism, I think. So
yeah. Answering some audience questions, somebody asked the writers, how similar is the Discovery show to the recent Kelvin timeline movies? Mm-hmm. And Akiva Goldsman replied, the question was phrased, very similar, kind of similar, not similar at all.
Right.
It was multiple choice. Akiva Goldsman said, very mildly, sort of in various ways. Star Trek itself is complicated. Enterprise, which gets a bad rap, is its own thing, as is DS9, as is the original series, as is the animated series. We're bigger than any of the shows in that way. We are more like the movies. Our sets are giant and more very filmic. We are very visual effects heavy. You can't point the camera without pointing at a green screen. It's big. So in that way, we are like the movies. I can only say this, we are not in the Kelvin timeline, we are in the original series timeline, so we resonate with those stories. We are the precursor. We are 10 years before TOS, so we are telling those sorts of stories. So yeah, it sounds like it'll be more traditional types of narratives, but told on the
scale,
the grand scale
of a movie.
Yeah.
And just, I guess if there was any lingering doubt as to where it would be, because I still see this sometimes in comment sections, somebody will see a trailer, and because of the kind of the visual style of it, they'll be like, it looks like it's in the Kelvin timeline. Okay, it's not. It's not in the Kelvin timeline. Stop saying that.
You can have
it just looks nice.
you can have a self-lit set or have even a lens flare in the prime timeline. It's still possible to photograph something where a streak of photons will hit the camera lens and create that effect in camera. That's not something that only happens in an alternate timeline. It
does not mean you have committed to the Abrams aesthetic.
The important thing to take away from here is that they say they're going with the TOS type of stories. They're the precursor to that world, and that's what they're writing the show to be set in.
So that's cool. Devotion to the original show, devotion to Trek canon and tradition and all that kind of stuff. That's good.
And to build on that, they talk about some of the aliens in the show. Most notably, the alien character Saru, played by Doug Jones, who Kristen Beyer is writing has written a Saru-centric episode. No surprise, they would want to do an episode to introduce us to this new type of alien. She said, "It will feel like the most traditional Star Trek, the most beautiful. What Doug Jones does is just simply jaw-dropping. You will find out so much about his culture, and there are so many surprises about him." So I love hearing that it'll be like a very type of traditional Star Trek episode where we explore a new civilization. They did talk about the Klingons, which I'm having trouble getting on board with the look of these Klingons. But building on something we mentioned earlier about how the Klingons are going to be depicted and how we're going to see some things from their perspective, Akiva Goldsman said, "One of the driving forces of this war was to not vilify either side. The show is often told from both points of view. It is certainly about the Federation, but there are a significant section of the narrative that are purely from the Klingon point of view and in Klingon."
Oh, wow.
As in the Klingon language. That allows the audience to participate in the debate of who is right and who is wrong.
That's an interesting way to try and pull people in. Usually, Trek is, I'm not going to say heavy-handed, but heavy-handed about, who they side with. It doesn't mean that they don't leave it open-ended at times. There's lots of stories I can think of that are pretty open-ended. But, there's a general Federation philosophy that comes through in a lot. The notion of really letting the sort of Klingon perspective speak that way to the point where, like, a significant sort of, if not, like, major, but significant portions of any given episode is going to show the Klingon perspective, that's pretty interesting.
Akiva Goldsman was also asked about, other aliens that would be seen in Star Trek Discovery, and he went on to say, "Klingons are the focus, but there is definitely a medium deep dive into Vulcans and what it means to be Vulcan. And there are some old fan favorites, but not with any real penetrative depth." So I'm glad to hear there's going to be some fan favorite aliens, maybe like some Andorians in the background, a Tellaride here or there.
Oh, I thought they might have. I thought he was saying that about the Vulcans specifically, like, T'Pau is going to be on this,
No. This was in response to a question about
broader about aliens in general.
That we'll see on the show.
So Klingon focus, some Vulcan asides, and some other fan favorites. That's cool. I would love to see more of that in general, especially the Horta. I feel like not enough has been done with that, even though they wouldn't really be discovered until Kirk's time, or I don't know. They were around.
No, we've talked about this like 10 times. Like, they haven't made first contact with the Hortas.
Oh, that's right. The miners didn't even know about them on there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to work the Horta in, man.
They can't have the Horta, they can't have Gorn.
Yeah, but they probably could, though. Enterprise would have found a way. Enterprise did find a way.
Yeah, they did it in the Mirror Universe, where continuity didn't matter. The final panel that we'll talk about was held for the Star Trek Discovery actors. Actually, specifically, Mary Cheffo, who plays Klingon Commander L'Rell, Kenneth Mitchell, who plays the Klingon Commander Cole, Sam Bartholomewis, who plays Ensign Connor, and Wilson Cruz, who plays the Dr. Hugh Culber, also the love interest of Lieutenant Paul Stamets. These were the actors who weren't currently shooting in Canada. So this is
they got to go and make the press junkets.
Yeah, this was who was making the rounds representing the show. The main thing I took away from this panel is that these people playing Klingons, they are speaking a shitload of Klingon on the show. All these actors talked about just studying the language. Mary Cheffo said that she's real nerdy and she's into Shakespeare and really focusing on the meaning of language, and she's actually trying to learn Klingon, it sounds like. She's been tweeting stuff in Klingon.
Oh, wow.
She tweeted a picture of her Klingon dictionary, and it's just covered with notes and dog ears and stuff. The actor playing the Klingon Cole, Kenneth Mitchell, he is not having as much fun with the language. He's saying he's having to spend in his free time on his days off just all day trying to memorize the Klingon dialogue, because it's all
doing it
foreign to him.
Oh man, what's that pop Swedish band from the 70s?
ABBA?
ABBA, yeah. Didn't they didn't like know English, or didn't know it well, and so they kind of learned a lot of that stuff phonetically, or so I heard.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's what I heard. At least that was that's the popular story. Could be completely false.
I don't know how true that is. I've been to Sweden. Everyone there speaks English.
Yeah, but you weren't in Sweden in the 70s.
That's true.
Anyway, but yeah, that sounds like a big barrier. I have a tough time with languages. I think that would be very difficult for me. It's cool in a way, as someone who doesn't have to memorize it, that these people are getting like a crash course in Klingonese. Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah, but and another thing, touching on that Kenneth Mitchell pointed out, was that some of the Klingon actors who aren't American, who are bilingual, who already speak multiple languages, they actually had a much easier time. But him being an American, the big joke is that Americans only speak English.
Yeah, that's no joke. That's true.
Yeah, we struggle at learning other languages, especially Klingon. But we did see a picture of Cole for the first time. And they said this is a Klingon of a different house. They said all the Klingons we've seen before are a part of the House of Kahless. I guess they're descendants of Kahless, the Unforgettable. And Cole is actually a member of the House of Kor. And he looks like this. So Dave, what do you think about the Klingon Cole?
So it looks like he's got this almost, I would say, dark sort of violet cast to his skin. Is that blood on his face, or like a tribal tattoo running up and down?
It could be either.
And he's got like could be either blood or tribal tattoo roughly running from his forehead down directly over his eye, down his cheek, and maybe to almost chin level. Like as a general design, his outfit kind of has kind of a worn brown leather, kind of, I'm not shorthanded and say it looks a little steampunkish, that, if this guy was driving a steampunk Zeppelin, I'd buy into it. Sort of a coppery metallic gauntlets, and he's got like sort of a Klingon Ridge style band piping sort of thing down the sleeve of his shirt, that also looks like, like it could be, yeah, I think it evokes the forehead thing, honestly.
But do you like it? Do you hate it?
I think it looks aesthetically fine. It's still weird to me to change the Klingons to this degree. I mean, that's going to be sticking my craw a little bit too. Once they're on the show and they're talking and they're doing stuff, I'm going to have to either accept it or not. I'm sure I can run with it. And I think it, like I say, on its own merits, good look. Doesn't wow me, but it's good at what it does. So,
I like the costume.
B minus.
The costume is a lot more Klingon to me than the bone armor that we saw up until now.
Right.
But when they said that Klingons in different houses will have a different look, I got excited.
It's not quite as Road Warrior as we're used to from all of course, the new look for them.
Yeah, but if you think about, how the Klingons dressed on the original series, maybe
it is actually closer to that.
Expand on that,
right? If like a modern day designer tried to kind of recreate those color patterns and designs a little bit, but with the detail level of a movie and Game of Thrones competition in mind and all that. I think you're right. This is it's a good analogy. This looks like a fancied up version of almost the old Klingon look.
Yeah, so I like the costume, but I'm guessing there's a good chance that every Klingon we see in the show, even though they say some are going to be different, some are going to be from different houses, they're all going to be like this hairless, weird ugly Klingon head that doesn't look like a Klingon to me.
Yeah.
And that's going to drive me crazy. But I'm hoping that the writing and the acting is good enough and the narrative is good enough that I get over it. Like I said earlier, I'll side with quality.
Maybe the sarcophagus ship will discover how to grow hair in the first season, and that'll be the big reveal.
They have like Klingon Rogaine.
Yes.
But why are they all bald when they had hair on Enterprise?
Time travel
and
stuff?
they should be some of the originalist Klingons we saw in the original series.
Yeah.
But anyways, I think we're going to get onto that in an installment of Tex-Trek where we talk about the look of the Discovery Klingons and what we've learned from Star Trek Las Vegas about the designing of the Discovery Klingons.
We should definitely dress up for that one and speak only in Klingon.
Yeah, maybe we'll do it in Klingon. No, we can have Klingon subtitles because neither one of us are going to learn the language.
That's true. I'm going to be like ABBA.
I think the last thing we have to cover would be Wilson Cruz, the actor playing our new Doctor and love interest of Paul Stamets. He had one quote that really stood out that I think deserves being reiterated. And he was talking about his character's relationship with Anthony Rapp's character,
which will be like, I guess, basically an established gay relationship, right?
Yes.
It's just going to be there in the background all the time, as sure as Worf and Troy or any other relationship that ever cropped up on the shows.
And he said, for anyone who doesn't understand why this is such a big deal, it is because there is a kid out there who's going to turn on his TV sometime in September or October, and he's going to be a young little boy or girl who is questioning their sexuality or orientation, and they're going to see two men love each other and be there for each other and support each other and be in awe of each other's genius. And it isn't going to be an issue. It's not something we are going to explain to you. It is just going to be what it is.
That's awesome. To me, that's another one of those, this is Trek doing what I want it to do.
One of the things that drive me crazy that I see online a lot, not a lot, that I see occasionally here and there, just because I spend so much time looking at Star Trek shit on the internet, is people who comment and say, why are we getting this shoved down our throats? Why are we getting this gay relationship shoved in our face? And I think that's a way that some people that want to criticize homosexuality being depicted on TV, like, I think that's kind of their angle that they think they can get away with it with, like, well, if you want to normalize being gay, you shouldn't just, like, make it a big deal and flash it around to everyone and shove it down our throats all the time. But that's not what they're doing. This completely negates your complaint. They're saying that this will be treated as just a normal thing on the show. It won't be a big deal. That's why it's a big deal.
Right.
Because
they're not doing an episode that's going to tell you to accept this. They're going to depict it just like they would any other relationship. It would be as ridiculous as someone saying, why did Star Trek Next Generation shove heterosexuality down our throat with Riker and Troy all the time, or Picard and Crusher, or any other relationship that popped up on that show? They were just normal relationships.
Yeah, and no shoving. Our fiction should reflect reality. I think Cruz's quote explains why representation matters. And so that's laid out for you. If you still don't understand that, I'm sorry. But we should represent the people of the world in our fiction. People are gay sometimes. You have people in your family or at school or at work who are gay. That's just the way it is. And there should be people on the TV shows you watch that are gay also. Sometimes people are gay, so get over it.
Yeah.
And I think that wraps it up. That's all we have to talk about from the recent EW article and Star Trek Las Vegas, except for the Klingon design and the alien design makeup panel that they had at Star Trek Las Vegas. which we will be talking about in a future installment of Tex-Trek. So keep your eyes peeled for that, and we'll have that posted shortly. And until then,
live long and prosper, y'all.
Thank all of you so much for checking out this installment of Tex-Trek. I hope you enjoyed it. Please be sure to like our YouTube videos and subscribe to our channel. Audio-only version of episodes are available at our website, www.tex-trek.com. Please check out our site, especially if you just want an audio-only podcast. We have that available for you. Y'all can also keep up with us online. You can follow us on Twitter at Tex-Trek, or you can check us out on Facebook at www.facebook.com/tex-trek. Please, by all means, let us know what you think by dropping a comment anywhere you see fit. We definitely want to hear your feedback. Let us know what you liked and what you would like to see more of, what you would like to see differently going forward. If you want to email me directly, go ahead. I can be reached at fathereeactual@tex-trek.com. Thank all y'all again. Take care.